Hey guys, this is Illusion PODFIC, and today we're going to be reading Green Through and Through by another fucking Robin. This is Chapter 19. When Peter slinks back through an open window and into the bookshop, it is well past 3 in the morning. If it were up to him, he would have stayed out later, listening to intoxicated gangsters being an excellent way of gathering intel. However, he had not one, not two, but 3 unimpressed glares aimed at him periodically through the night, as well as 24 voices yelling at him constantly, and that was enough to make even the most stubborn relent. Peter did have a good, productive time, though. He learned that everyone hates Joker, the Falcones need to pay their goons more, Red Hood supports unions, and that classic literature isn't dead. He isn't going to lie, it caught him slightly off guard to see a man built like an upside-down Dorito, made of muscle reading Jane Austen in a dive bar. But being close friends with Wade Wilson, a world-class mercenary and part-time X-Men who has a similar physique and also worships My Little Ponies, Equestria Girls movies, like they're made of pure gold, has taught him not to judge a book by its cover. It brought back memories of MJ mocking Mr. Collins loudly at their table, while Gwen and Cindy joined in, topped off with RP accents varying in accuracy but all equally pompous and hilarious during their monthly book club. Book club wasn't a choice, rather an unavoidable consequence of Ned overhearing MJ proclaiming that no one ever has or ever will live up to Mary Shelley and the literary masterpiece that is Frankenstein, and blurting out, "The guy from Hotel Transylvania?" That day, MJ discovered that not a single person at Peter's table had ever read Frankenstein, and coerced/threatened/forced all of them into a book club too, ensure that there is at least a small percentage of people at her school who aren't heathens. They were going to read The Court of Monte Cristo next, before... Nope, Peter, think about something else. Anything else. Instead, he strips out of his school uniform with a blank mind, tossing the shirt into an empty shelf and flopping onto his armchair, curling up into a ball, focusing on his breathing, the way his chest rises and falls with each new breath. It isn't long before his eyes start to droop and he falls into the warm embrace of sleep. Peter opens his eyes to watch a snowflake settle on his nose. He sits still as more and more gather on his cheeks and eyelashes nestling in his hair. "Where are we?" he asks the figure beside him, not wanting to turn his head and disrupt the snow. "My home, Asgard." Peter hums and takes in his surroundings, beholding the godly domain. They sit on a small log in a clearing, perfectly pristine snow blanketing the ground around them. The trees stand tall and strong, twinkling with frost, standing guard like soldiers. The clearing overlooks a grand hall, made of shimmering wood, echoing with laughter and warmth, casting orange reflections on the ice. "It's beautiful." It is. They sit in silence for a long while, watching a robin imprint tiny footsteps in the snow. "Why did you bring me here?" Peter asks eventually, after the bird flits into a tree and the distance muffles its chirping. The god tilts his head with a fond smile. "To teach." The boy turns his head at last towards the god, expecting a grand suit of armor to cover his body or golden crown on his head. Instead, Loki wears a simple green tunic, the color of the surrounding trees, calming and muted, not the vicious emerald color that Peter typically associated with the god of mischief. The cuffs are decorated with intertwining gold snakes, but also runes and lightning and nets. He wears a long cape fastened around his neck in a golden clasp, made of heavy fabric. A garment made for warmth, not flare. His long black hair is held out of his face by a series of complicated-looking braids, and, perhaps most jarringly, his skin is a pale blue. It's surprising that Peter even recognized him as Loki, the fearsome god of mischief and trickery, but at the same time, not surprising at all. This is clearly who Loki is, beneath the enchantments and the bravado and the lies. A man, sitting in the snow, hair braided by his mother, looking down at the mead hall that houses the famous Aesir Yule celebratory feast, and smiling at the booming laugh of his brother. "My mother trained me here when I was a boy, in the arts of sorcery and strategy and wisdom. I and the other heroes from our realm believe it is imperative that you are similarly taught." "Why?" "Because you are in possession of an infinity stone, and you must learn to, if not control, then acknowledge and accept that power." "Can't I give it back? I didn't choose this." Loki clasps Peter's hands and looks into his eyes. "Precisely." The snow on the ground suddenly rises and starts swirling around the two in a violent flurry, whipping howling wind at Peter's face and lashing ice at his cheeks. He scrunches his eyes shut and tries to cry out, but if the sound even escapes his lips, it is quickly swallowed by the snow. Loki's hands remain steadfast on him, and soon Peter feels the cold sting on his face disappear. When he opens his eyes again, they are in the same clearing, but the ground is carpeted in leaves, the trees hanging with candles and glowing orbs, illuminating the trees in a warm glow. The sky is no longer a clear expanse of gray-white, but a deep purple, splattered with constellations and pinkish clouds. A small boy runs past, barely knee-high, with tangled blonde hair that flies behind him. He stops in the middle of the clearing and turns in a slow circle, surveying the surroundings, ignorant of Peter and Loki's presence. A dagger breaks out of the shadows between the branches, whizzing past the boy's cheek, leaving a shallow red line in its path before lodging into a tree. Peter expects the boy to cry out, but instead he stomps his foot in frustration and whines, "You cheat, brother. How am I to have a chance at victory if you insist on hiding in the shadows like a coward?" An even smaller boy emerges from where the dagger had come from, the darkness seeming reluctant to let him leave, sticking to his clothes. Shadow Boy has chin-length black hair slicked back against his skull in an attempt to hide the obvious fluffiness and make him look more mature. This contrasts the elder one, whose blonde scruff is filled with twigs and leaves. A half-hearted attempt at a braid hangs behind his head, but had been torn open and is no longer keeping any of the hair out of his face. The younger crosses his arms and raises his head in pride, an adorable show of ego on a boy who can't be older than 4. "Perhaps you are simply upset that you cannot beat a superior opponent. I'll show you superior." The boy lunges forward and pins the smaller boy to the ground before attacking him with tickles around his midsection. The raven-headed boy keeps trying to escape or yell for the attack to stop, but is interrupted each time by sharp giggles, causing the blonde boy to keep him pinned and increase the ferocity of tickles. Ahem. The blonde pauses at the voice, giving the smaller boy an opening, which he takes readily, shoving the elder to the floor with an oof. "Mother, we were just—" The larger boy tries to defend before he is interrupted by a shrill yell. "Thor ruined my hair!" "It's hardly ruined, simply more interesting than before," he says with shrugged shoulders and a terribly concealed smile. The younger boy points an accusing finger at his brother and points with wide eyes to his mother. "You see, he admits it. I did no such thing. Did too. Did not. Did boys." They stop arguing immediately and turn to look at the woman. She wears a beautiful olive-colored dress, golden ringlets piled in an intricate bun atop her head. "Sorry, Mother," they say in unison. Their mother nods her head, bending forward to pluck leaves out of the smallest boy's hair, before tucking it behind his ears. She turns around, allowing the black-haired boy, a younger Loki, to stick out his tongue at his older brother. In response, Thor uses his fingers to stretch his mouth and goes cross-eyed. Their mother turns back around and affixes Thor with a disappointed look, to which Thor pleads his innocence, all while Loki smirks at his brother out of his line of sight. When she is finished with her light scolding, she turns to address both her sons. "Do you know why I brought you here today?" "To learn how to kill vicious monsters?" Thor shouts, miming a sword fight with a branch. "To learn how to kill annoying brothers?" Loki deadpans, earning a branch thrown at his face. She rolls her eyes fondly. "Sit." Both the young boys and the spectator obey, sitting cross-legged over crunchy leaves. "I have brought you to learn the ways of the stars." Thor sits a little straighter. Loki slouches. "But Mother, we have already catalogued every constellation and learned of each race of importance. We have not forgotten. We are intelligent." "Aw, you think I'm intelligent?" "It will not stop me from skewering you upon a— I do not think you are unintelligent or forgetful, sons. I do, however, believe it will interest you to learn where the stars came from." Loki sits straighter, too. Thor is practically vibrating where he sits. Frigga has a tender smile played on her lips as she joins her children, and Peter, on the ground. "Before creation," she began, waving her hands and creating shimmering pictures in the air, "before even the birth of the great giant Ymir, there were 6 singularities." She cast her hands out to show bright, burning nebulas. These singularities were scattered when creation began, but their essence remains, condensed magic in the form of the 6 infinity stones. The swirling clouds in our projection condensed into thrumming crystalline structures. Many believe the stones to be weapons or tools. Some such people have tried to take their power and claim it for themselves. All such beings have failed, even the great celestials. Peter doesn't know what a celestial is, but if the scrunched and disbelieving faces of the godlings before him are anything to go by, then they are powerful beyond comprehension. "Indeed, my sons. Do you know why the celestials were unable to wield the stones?" Thor shakes his head adamantly. Loki's eyebrows scrunch adorably as he tries to puzzle it out in his head. Their mother remains patient, but eventually Loki shakes his head in defeat. Because they are not weapons to be aimed and fired, but forces that we can only hope to serve. Because of the inherent ego presented in all sentient life, the stones have never been used to their full potential. Thor raises his hand, bouncing up and down to speak. But Mother, didn't Isan have a magic stone? Yes, Loki defends. Isan the Searcher destroyed a planet with a single strike. You were lying, Mother, he exclaims, and then quieter into himself. I thought lying was wrong. How hypocritical. The goddess simply chuckles. I tell no lies, boys. Can you recall how exactly Isan used his stone? It was embedded in his cool hammer, Thor exclaims, like Mjolnir, but huge. Exactly. Even a great celestial could not possess a stone, having to confine it to a specialized weapon and use it as a proxy, greatly diminishing its power. So I could have a magic stone in my hammer? She laughs. No, Thor. The stones still bear a heavy price, too heavy for shoulders as small as yours. How heavy? I could lift it. I'm strong. She was clearly speaking in metaphor, you oaf. Thor grabs a handful of leaves and stuffs them into his brother's hair, eliciting a screech and a dagger aimed at his shoulder. Their mother swiftly pulls them apart with golden wisps of magic, redirecting the dagger at a nearby tree, untangling their flying mess of limbs and plopping both boys back on the ground. She fixes each boy with a glare until they bow their heads and mumble apologies. Seemingly content, she continues, Indeed, I was speaking in metaphor. The stones are sentient beings, and as such refuse to be used as tools. Full control over a stone is truly a lost cause. It is rather a partnership that is necessary to succeed. If one attempts to control the stones, they will simply start controlling the captors back. To truly use the full extent of their power, a symbiotic bond must be formed. Loki raises his hand timidly. His mother motions for him to speak. How will the stone control their captors? Frigga smiles. Excellent question, my son. Allow me to show you. She spreads her arms, and the red stone projection grows larger than the rest. This is the reality stone. It holds the power to rewrite the fabric of every realm imaginable. But this stone is very vindictive. Without a suitable host, anyone who tries to control it will slowly find themselves being erased from reality. It was once in the possession of the Dark Elf Svartalm, who tried to use it to send the universe into infinite night. But they were crippled by its toll and vanquished by King Bor, your grandfather. She minimizes the reality stone and zooms in on a yellow one. This is the Mind Stone. Its current location is unknown, though some to believe it to be on a scepter on the planet Titan near Midgard. This stone carries the power to change, control, and own minds. However, the stone is tricky, and instead of controlling minds of its own power, it chooses to scatter the mind of its bearer inside the mind of others. This allows them power over the mind of others, yes, but eventually its wielder's mind becomes too divided to properly function. This can be mitigated or slowed by using the stone through a proxy like a scepter, but never avoided. Peter wonders if that's why Vision can coexist with the stone so well, his mind already scattered throughout the internet. She moves on to a blue stone. This is the Space Stone. It has control over the position of every single thing in the universe, relative to itself. But this stone is vain. It wishes to be constantly surrounded, and as such will affect its holder's perception and become addicting. To contain it, the Assyrian Vanir hid it away on Midgard, away from those who could be corrupted by it. The Power Stone, the Mirage focuses on the purple stone. This stone embodies the force of creation and destruction, and grants manipulation to those to its owner. But this stone is greedy. It wants to covet power for itself, and as such will absorb energies from whatever it touches instead of granting the energies to its host. I believe that it is currently trapped inside a conduit guarded by the High Priestess Morag. And the Time Stone. This is the one that Peter knows he tried to stop it from being stolen once. He remembers chasing. Who was he chasing? Loki, the adult one, places a grounding hand on his shoulder and gestures to listen with his head. Over all of time, it cooperates with his bearer so long as they are powerful enough to wield it or are using a conduit to not perish immediately. But causes its owner to become a fixed point, every action they make a canon event, inhibiting them from going back within their own timeline and changing it irreparably. Peter looks down at the grass under him, brow furrowed in deep thought, trying to compute the onslaught of information when the child version of Thor speaks. But Mother, what of the orange stone? Peter lifts his head and sees that they've neglected a stone, orange and smaller than the rest, looking more like a nugget than a geode. It seems unassuming, but it pulls at him, a tug in his gut. halfway between nausea and adoration. His skin prickles like stepping into a heated house from being out in the cold of winter. "I see that you're right, my son." The other stones fade from the air, leaving the orange one, Soul Stone. Something whispers in his ear, "Us." It illuminates the clearing, hovering above their heads. This is the Soul Stone. It is as honest as it is fickle, allegedly granting powers over all beings, reviving the dead, imprisoning souls, seeking truths and memories. She glances briefly at the older Loki, so fast that had Peter not had inhuman reaction, he wouldn't have caught it, as well as imbuing inanimate objects with souls. But none of this is for certain. This stone is tricky, you see. It tells its wielder its price outright, a soul for a soul, but no one has managed to properly satisfy the terms. Though many have tried, it hides away on a far-off planet, Vormir, with an immortal guardian, loyal to the stones to keep it company. Because no one has appeased its terms, it refuses to work at all. The only recorded instances of it being used are in tandem with the other stones, and even then it sulks and refuses to work properly. I hope one day I will see it opened and in use. As a witch, I would love to see what magic it keeps contained. You know, because the Soul Stone refuses to grant its powers to any being, all soul-related witchcraft has become dark forbidden magic. Truly a great loss. The woman clasps her hands and rises. So, first one back to the palace gets to ride the Balog Snipe. The three of them take off running into the woods, the boys trailing behind their mother, yelling at the unfairness of the lack of a countdown and laughing. Loki rises, dusting the leaves off his cape and tunic, and offers Peter a hand up. "Have you learned anything valuable?" Peter grasps at the warm, contented feeling of recognition in his chest and looks up at the god. "Yeah, I think I have." Loki nods and wordlessly reaches out to tap Peter's forehead. The world around him starts dissolving into smoke and Peter wakes up. Alright guys, and that is the end of chapter 19 of Green Through and Through by Another Fucking Robin. I hope you guys liked it, and I'll see you next chapter.